Well, hello everybody. Good evening. Happy Story Time Tuesday. Another week has gone by. And where do we find ourselves once again? Back here together for Story Time Tuesday. Where, as you can see, we have a new book to start. That's right. It's time to start book 3 of the Xanth series, Castle Roogna. I'm gonna have to see if I can find a better picture of Castle Roogna over there, because that one's not very good for a cover picture. Uh, let's take a moment. Just sit right there. I'll tell you how I became the prince of a town called Bel Air. Castle Roogna book cover. Let's see if we can get one that looks a little bit better. Ah! Refit this. Let's undo all of that. You guys get to watch some of my behind the scenes as we're getting started here. Well, hopefully that's a little bit better. Let's go see. Does that look better? That is a better looking picture. Yay! Okay, better looking picture than the one that I had before. Aha. All right, everyone. Well, so at the end of the last book, for those of you guys who may have missed it, we reached the end of the source of magic. Magic has returned to the land of Xanth. Bink has his son, who is a magician in his own right that can talk to inanimate objects. What a fun magical talent. Um and everything has returned to normal. So there we are. That's what basically brought us into this one. And so then we come into Castle Roogna. And let's see, what is our synopsis for Castle Roogna? Does somebody want to tell me? Let's look it up. Castle Roogna. From the inside flap. Millie had been a ghost for 800 years, but now, restored by the magic of Xanth, she was again a maddeningly desirable woman. She could have had any man she wanted, except the one she did want, Jonathan the Zombie. To grant Millie her desire and to prove his right to rule Xanth in the future, young magician Dor embarked on a quest for the elixir which would restore Jonathan to full life. But the potion could only be found in the past, so through a magic tapestry to the past he went. There you go. There's a quick synopsis, so we have an idea of what we're looking at in this book. So everyone, let's go ahead and sit back, relax, and prepare to enjoy. One other thing, I want to make sure I give a shout out, and I'll actually give this a couple of times throughout the stream tonight. A shout out to a couple of people who have given me some feedback. Primarily and first off, the real Barbette. She was the first of them, even if I didn't listen to her, and so my apologies and my appreciation to her. That I was speaking at a slower pace than I should have been when I was reading these books. And in part that came from feedback I had received quite a while ago that it tended to read way too quickly. And so I had slowed it down and erred on the wrong side of everything. And so I've been making an effort to speed myself back up to an acceptable place to be. So hopefully you will find that these books are going much more quickly now and being a little bit more engaging as you go through. So a big shout out to the real Barbette, as well as anybody else who gave me some feedback that my pace was running a little bit slow on these. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And hopefully you guys notice a difference as we go through. But to that note, sit back everybody, relax, and prepare to enjoy as we jump into book number 3 of the Xanth series, Castle Roogna. Chapter 1, Ogre. Millie the ghost was beautiful. Of course, she wasn't a ghost anymore, so she was Millie the nurse. She was not especially bright, and she was hardly young. She was 29 years old as she reckoned it, and about 829 as others reckoned it. The oldest creature currently associated with Castle Roogna. She had been ensorcelled as a maid of 17, 8 centuries ago, when Castle Roogna was young, and restored to life at the time of Dor's birth. In the interim she had been a ghost, and the label had never quite worn off. And why should it? By all accounts, she had been a most attractive ghost. Indeed, she had the loveliest glowing hair, flowing like poppycorn silk to the dimpled backs of her knees. The terrain those tresses covered in passing was... How was it that Dor had never noticed it before? Millie had been his nurse all these years, taking care of him while his parents were busy, and they tended to be busy a great deal of the time. Oh, he understood that well enough. He told others that the king trusted his parents Bink and Chameleon, and anyone that king trusted was bound to be very busy. Because the king's missions were too important to leave to nobodies. All that was true enough. But Dorn knew his folks didn't have to accept all those important missions that took them all over the land of Xanth and beyond. They simply liked to travel, to be away from home. Right now they were far away in Mundania, and nobody went to Mundania for pleasure. It was because of him, because of his talent. Dor remembered years ago when he had talked to the double bed Bink and Chameleon used, and asked it what had happened overnight, just from idle curiosity, and it had said, well, it had been quite interesting, especially since Chameleon had been in her beauty stage, prettier and stupider than Millie the Ghost, which was going some. But his mother had overheard some of that dialogue and told his father, and after that, Dor wasn't allowed in the bedroom any more. It wasn't that his parents didn't love him, Bink had carefully explained. It was that they felt nervous about what they called invasion of privacy. So they tended to do their most interesting things away from the house, and Dor had learned not to pry. Not when and where anyone in authority could overhear, at any rate. Millie took care of him. She had no privacy secrets. True, she didn't like him talking to the toilet, though it was just a pot that got emptied every day into the back garden where dung beetles magicked the stuff into sweet-smelling roses. Dor couldn't talk to roses because they were alive. He could talk to a dead rose, but then it remembered only what had happened since it was cut, and that wasn't very much. And Millie didn't like him making fun of Jonathan. Apart from that, she was quite reasonable, and he liked her. But he had never really noticed her shape before. Millie was very like a nymph, with all sorts of feminine projections and softnesses and things, and her skin was as clear as the surface of a milkweed pod just before it got milked. She usually wore a light gauzy dress that lent her an ethereal quality strongly reminiscent of her ghosthood, yet failed to conceal excitingly gentle contours beneath. Her voice was as soft as the call of a wraith, yet she had more wit than a nymph, and more substance than a wraith. She had... Oh, what the fudge am I trying to figure out? Dor demanded aloud. How should I know? The kitchen table responded irritably. It had been fashioned from gnarled acorn wood, and it had a crooked temper. Millie turned, smiling automatically. She had been washing plates at the sink. She claimed it was easier to do them by hand than to locate the proper cleaning spell. And probably for her it was. The spell was in powder form, and it came in a box the spellcaster made up at the palace, and the powder was forever running out. Few things were more annoying than chasing all over the yard after running powder. So Millie didn't take a powder. She scrubbed the dishes herself. Are you still hungry, Dor? No, he said, embarrassed. He was hungry, but not for food, if hunger was the proper term. There was a hesitant, somewhat sodden knock at the door. Millie glanced across at it, her hair rippling down its luxuriant length. That will be Jonathan, she said brightly. Jonathan the zombie. Dor scowled. It wasn't that he had anything special against zombies, but he didn't like them around the house. They tended to drop putrid chunks of themselves as they walked, and they were not pretty to look at. Oh, what do you see in that bag of bones? Dor demanded, hunching his body and pulling his lips in around his teeth to mimic the zombie mode. Why, Dor, that isn't nice. Jonathan is an old friend. I've known him for centuries. No exaggeration. The zombies had haunted the environs of Castle Roogna as long as the ghosts had. Naturally, the two types of freaks had gotten to know each other. But Millie was a woman now, alive and whole and firm. Extremely firm, Dor thought, as he watched her move trippingly across the kitchen to the back door. Jonathan was, in contrast, a horribly animated dead man. a living corpse. How could she pay attention to him? Beauty and the Beast, he muttered savagely. Frustrated and angry, Dor stalked out of the kitchen and into the main room of the cottage. The floor was smooth, hard-rind, polished until it had become reflective, and the walls were yellow-white. He banged his fist into one. "Hey, stop that!" the wall protested. "You'll fracture me. I'm only cheese, you know." Dor knew. The house was a large, hollowed-out cottage cheese, long since hardened into rigidity. When it had grown, it had been alive, but as a house, it was dead, and therefore he could talk to it. Not that it had anything worth saying. Dor stormed on out the front door. "Don't you dare slam me," it warned, but he slammed it anyway, and heard its shaken groan behind him. That door had always been more ham than cheese. The day outside was gloomy. He should have known. Jonathan preferred gloomy days to come calling, because they kept his chronically rotting flesh from drying up so quickly. In fact, it was getting about to rain. The clouds were kneading themselves into darker convolutions, getting set to clean out their systems. "Don't you water on me!" Dor yelled into the sky in much the tone that Dor had used on him. The nearest cloud chuckled evilly, with a sound like thunder. "Dor, wait!" a little voice called. It was Grundy the Golem. Actually, no Golem anymore. Not that it made much difference. He was Dor's outdoor companion, and was always alert for Dor's treks into the forest. Dor's folks had really fixed it up so he would always be supervised by people like Millie, who had no embarrassing secrets, or like Grundy, who didn't care if they did. In fact, Grundy would be downright proud to have an embarrassment. That started Dor on another chain of thought. Actually, it wasn't just Bink and Chameleon. Nobody in Castle Roogna cared to associate too closely with Dor, because all sorts of things went on that the furniture saw and heard, and Dor could talk to the furniture. For him, the walls had ears and the floors had eyes. What was wrong with people? Were they ashamed of everything they did? Only King Trent seemed completely at ease with him, but the king could hardly spend all his time entertaining a mere boy. Grundy caught up. "This is a bad day for exploring, Dor," he warned. "That storm means business." Dor looked dourly up at the cloud. "Go soak your empty head," he yelled at it. "You're no thunderhead, you're a dunderhead." He was answered by a spate of yellow hailstones, and had to hunch over like a zombie and shield his face with his arms until they passed. "Be halfway sensible, Dor," Grundy urged. "Don't mess with that mean storm. It'll wash us out." Dor reluctantly yielded to common sense. "We'll seek cover, but not at home. The zombie's there." "I wonder what Millie sees in him," Grundy said. "That's what I asked." The rain was commencing. They hurried to an umbrella tree, whose great thin canopy was just spreading to meet the droplets. Umbrella trees preferred dry soil, so they shielded it against rain. When the sun shone, they folded up, so as not to obstruct the rays. There were also parasol trees, which reacted oppositely, spreading for the sun and folding for the rain. When the two happened to seed together, there was a real wilderness problem. Two larger boys, the sons of palace guards, had already taken shelter under the same tree. "Well," one cried, "if it isn't the dope who talks to chairs!" Go find your own tree, twerp, the other boy ordered. He had sloping shoulders and a projecting chin.
Look, Horsejaw, Grundy snapped. This tree doesn't belong to you. Everyone shares umbrellas in a storm.
Not with chair talkers, midget.
He's a magician, Grundy said indignantly. He talks to the inanimate. No one else can do that. No one else ever could do that in the whole history of Xanth, or ever will again.
Let it be, Grundy, Dor murmured. The golem had a sharp tongue that could get them both into trouble. We'll find another tree. See? Horsejaw demanded triumphantly. Little Stinker doesn't stand up to his betters. And he laughed. Suddenly there was a detonation of sound right behind them. Both Dor and Grundy jumped in alarm before remembering that this was Horsejaw's talent, projecting booms. Both older boys laughed uproariously. Dor stepped out from under the umbrella, and his foot came down on a snake. He recoiled, but immediately the snake faded into a wisp of smoke. That was the other boy's talent, the conjuration of small, harmless reptiles. The two continued to laugh with such enthusiasm that they were collapsing against the umbrella trunk. Dor and Grundy went to another tree, prodded by another sonic boom. Dor concealed his anger. He didn't like being treated this way, but against the superior physical power of the older boys, he was helpless. His father Bink was a muscular man, well able to fight when the occasion required, but Dor took after his mother more, small and slender. How he wished he were like his father. The rain was pelting down now, soaking Dor and Grundy.
Why do you tolerate it? Grundy demanded. You are a magician.
A magician of communication, Dor retorted. That doesn't count for much among boys.
It counts for plenty,
Grundy cried, his little legs splashing through the forming puddles. Absent-mindedly, Dor reached down to pick him up. The one-time golem was only a few inches tall.
You can talk to their clothes, find out all their secrets, blackmail them.
No.
You're too damned ethical, Dor, Grundy complained. Power goes to the unscrupulous. If your father Bink had been properly unscrupulous, he'd have been king.
He didn't want to be king.
That's beside the point. Kingship isn't a matter of want, it's a matter of talent. Only a full male magician can be king. Which King Trent is. And he's a good king. My father says the land of Xanth has really improved since Magician Trent took over. It used to be all chaos and anarchy and bad magic, except for right near the villages. Your father sees the best in everyone. He is entirely too nice. You take after him. Dor smiled. Why, thank you, Grundy. That wasn't a compliment. I know it wasn't. To you. Grundy paused. Sometimes I get the sinister feeling you're not as naive as you seem. Who knows? Maybe little normal worms of anger and jealousy gnaw in your heart, as they do in other hearts. They do. Today, when the zombie called on Millie, he broke off. Oh, you notice Millie now. You're growing up. Dor whirled on him. And of course, since the golem was in his hand, Grundy whirled too. What do you mean by that? Merely that men notice things about women that boys don't. Don't you know what Millie's talent is? No. What is it? Sex appeal. I thought that was something all women had. Something all women wish they had. Millie's is magical. Any man who gets near her gets ideas.
That didn't make sense to Dor.
My father doesn't. Your father stays well away from her. Did you think that was coincidence?
Dor had thought it was his own talent that kept Bink away from home so much. It was tempting to think he was mistaken.
What about the king? He has iron control. But you can bet those ideas are percolating in his brain, out of sight. Ever notice how closely the queen watches him when Millie's around?
Dor had always thought it was him the queen was watching disapprovingly, when as a child Millie had taken him to the palace. Now he was uncertain, so he didn't argue further. The Golem was always full of gossipy news that adults found hilarious, even when the news was suspect. Adults could be sort of stupid at times. They came up to a pavilion in the Castle Roogna orchard. It had a drying stone set up for just such occasions as this. As they approached it, warm radiation came out, which started the pleasant drying of their clothes. Few things felt as good as a drying stone after a chill soaking.
I appreciate your service, Dryer, Dor told it.
All part of the job, the stone replied. My cousin, the sharpening stone, really has his work cut out for him. All those knives to hone, you know. Ha ha!
Ha ha!
Dor agreed mildly, patting it. The trouble with talking with inanimate objects was that they weren't very bright, but thought they were. Another figure emerged from the orchard, clasping a cluster of chocolate cherries in one hand. Oh no, she exclaimed, recognizing Dor. If it isn't Dodo Dor, the lifeless snooper.
Look who's talking, Grundy retorted. Irate Irene, palace brat.
Princess Irene to you, the girl snapped. My father is king, remember?
Well, you'll never be king, Grundy said.
'Cause women can't assume the throne, Gollum. But if I were a man...
If you were a man, you still wouldn't be king, because you don't have magician caliper magic.
I do too, she flared.
Stinkfinger?
Grundy inquired derisively. That's Green Thumb, she yelled furious. I can make any plant grow. Fast, big, healthy. Dor had stayed out of the argument, but fairness required his interjection.
That's creditable magic.
Stay out of this, Dodo, she snapped. What do you know about it? Dor spread his hands. How did he get into this argument he was trying to avoid?
Nothing. I can't grow a thing. You will when you're a man, Grundy muttered.
Irene remained angry. So, how come they call you a magician while I am only...
A spoiled brat,
Grundy finished for her. Irene burst into tears. She was a rather pretty child, with green eyes and a greenish tinge to her hair to match her talent, but her thumbs were normal flesh color. She was a girl and a year younger than Dor, so she could cry if she wanted to. But it bothered him. He wanted to get along with her, and somehow had never been able to. I hate you, she screeched at him. Genuinely baffled, Dor could only inquire, why? Because you're going to be king. And if I want to be queen, I'll have to...
To marry him, Grundy said. You really should learn to finish your own sentences.
She cried, and it sounded as if she really were about to throw up. She looked wildly about and spotted a tiny plant at the fringe of the pavilion. Grow! She yelled at it, pointing. The plant, responsive to her talent, grew. It was a shadow boxer, with little boxing gloves mounted on springy tendrils. The gloves clenched and struck at the shadows formed by distant lightning. Soon the boxer was several feet high, and the gloves were the size of human fists. They struck at the vague shadows of the pavilion's interior. Dor backed away, knowing the blows had force. Attracted by his motion and by the sharper shadow his body made, the plant leaned toward him. The gloves were now larger than human fists, and mounted on vines as thick as human wrists. There were a dozen of them, several striking while several more recoiled for the next strike, keeping the plant as a whole in balance. Irene watched, a small gloat playing about her mouth.
How did I get into this?
Dor asked, disgruntled. He didn't want to flee the pavilion. The storm had intensified, and yellow rain was cascading off the roof. The booming of its fusillade was unnerving. There were too many hailstones mixed in, and it looked suspiciously like a suitable habitat for tornado wraiths.
Well, I don't know for sure, the pavilion answered, but once I overheard the queen talking with a ghost as they took shelter from a small shower, and she said Bink always had been an annoyance to her, and now Bink's son was an annoyance to her daughter. She said she'd do something about it, if it weren't for the king.
But I never did anything to them,
Dor protested.
Yes, you did, Grundy said. You were born a full magician. They can't stand that.
Now the boxing gloves had him boxed in, backed to the very edge of the pavilion.
How do I get out of this?
Make a light, the pavilion said. Shadow boxers can't stand light.
I don't have a light.
One glove grazed his chest, but as he nudged away from it, water streamed down his back. This was a yellow rain. Did it leave a yellow streak?
Then you'd better run, the pavilion said.
Yeah, Dodo, Irene agreed. The plant was not bothering her, since she had enchanted it. Go bash your head into a giant hailstone. Some ice would be good for your brain. 3 more boxing gloves struck at him. Dor plunged into the rain. He was instantly soaked again, but fortunately the hailstones were small and light and somewhat mushy. Irene's mocking laughter pursued him. Gusts of wind buffeted him savagely, and lightning played about the sky. Dor knew he had no business being out in this storm, but he refused to return home. He ran into the jungle.
Turn 'em out,
Grundy yelled into his ear. The golem was clinging to his shoulder.
Get under cover.
It was excellent advice. Lightning bolts could do a lot of harm if they struck too near. After they had lain for a few hours on the ground and cooled off so they were not so bright, they could be gathered and used for bolting together walls and things. But a fresh one could spear right through a man. Nevertheless, Dor kept running. The general frustration and confusion he felt inside exceeded that outside. He was not so confused as to blunder into the obvious hazards of the wilderness. The immediate Castle Roogna environs were spelled to be safe for people and their friends, but the deep jungle could not be rendered safe short of annihilation. No spell would tame a tangle tree for long, or subdue a dragon. Instead, certain paths were protected, and the wise person remained on these paths. A lightning bolt cracked past him and buried its point in the trunk of a massive acorn tree. The brilliant length of the bolt quivering. It was a small one, but it had 3 good sharp jags and could have wiped Dor out if it had hit him. The tree trunk was blistering with the heat of it. That was too close a miss. Dor ran across to the nearest charmed path, one bearing south. No bolts would strike him there. He knew the path's ultimate destination was the magic dust village, governed by trolls, but he had never gone that far. This time, well, he kept running, though his breath was rasping past his teeth. At least the exertion kept him warm.
Good thing I'm along,
Grundy said in his ear.
That way there's at least one rational mind in the
Dor had to laugh, and his mood lightened.
Half a mind anyway,
he said. The storm was lightening too, as if in tandem with his mood. The way he interacted with the inanimate, that was entirely possible. He slowed to a walk, breathing hard, but continued south. How he wished he had a big, strong, muscular body that could run without panting or knock the gloves right off shadow boxers, instead of this rather small, slight frame. Of course, he didn't have his full growth yet, but he knew he would never be a giant.
I remember a storm we suffered down this way just before you were born,
Grundy remarked.
Your daddy, Bink, and Chester Centaur, and Crombie the soldier in griffin guise. The king transformed him for the quest, you know. And the good magician. The good magician Humphrey, Dor demanded. You traveled with him? He never leaves his castle. It was your father's quest for the source of magic. Naturally, Humphrey came along. The old gnome was always keen on information. Good thing, too. He's the one who showed me how to become real. Good thing for him, too. He met the Gorgon. And you should have seen the flip she did over him. The first man she could talk to who didn't turn to stone. Anyway, this storm was so bad, it washed out some of the stars from the sky. They were floating in puddles.
Stop, Grundy, Dor cried, laughing. I believe in magic, as any sensible person does, but I'm not a fool. Stars wouldn't float in water. They would fizzle out in seconds.
Maybe they did. I was riding a flying fish at the time, so I couldn't see them too well. But it was some storm.
There was a shudder in the ground, not thunder. Dor halted, alarmed.
What is that? Sounds like the tramp of a giant to me,
Grundy hazarded. His talent was translation, and he could interpret anything any creature said. But footfalls weren't language.
Or worse, it just might be.
Suddenly it loomed from the gloom.
An ogre,
Dor finished, terrified.
Right on the path. How could the enchantment have failed? We're supposed to be safe on these.
The ogre tramped on toward them, a towering hulk more than twice Dor's height, and broad in proportion. Its great gap-toothed mouth cracked open horrendously. An awful growl blasted out like the breath of a hungry dragon.
What say, little man? Will you give me a hand?
Grundy said.
What?
Dor asked, startled almost out of his fright.
That's what the ogre says. I was translating.
Oh, of course.
No, I need my hands. He can't eat them.
Though he was uncertain how the ogre could be stopped from eating anything he wanted, Ogres were great bone crunchers. The ogre growled again.
Me not eat whelp, me seek for help,
Grundy said. Then the golem did a double take.
Crunch,
he cried.
the vegetarian ogre. Then why does he want to eat my hand?
Dor demanded. The monster smiled. The expression most resembled the opening of a volcanic fissure. Gassy breath hissed out.
You loudmouth twerp, hardly bigger than a burp. That's me,
Grundy agreed, answering his own translation.
Good to see you again, Crunch. How's the little lady? She with hair like nettles and skin like mush, whose face would make a zombie blush. She's lovely as ever, me forsake she never,
the ogre replied. Dor was beginning to be able to make out the words directly. The thing was speaking his language, but with a foul accent that nearly obliterated meaning.
We have good bash, make little smash.
Dor was by this time reassured that the spell on the path had not failed. This ogre was harmless. Well, no ogre was harmless, but at least not ravening, and therefore able to mix with men.
A little smash?
Smash, baby ogre, bout like you. Now he gone, and we too few.
You smashed your baby?
Dor asked, horrified. Maybe there was something wrong with the path spell after all.
Oh no, Smash is the name of their baby,
Grundy explained.
All the ogres have descriptive names. Then why is Smash gone?
Dor demanded nervously.
Troll wives eat their husbands, so maybe ogres eat.
Smash wandered away in drizzle. Now we search for he fizzle.
This recent storm was a mere drizzle to the ogres? That made sense. No doubt Crunch used a lightning bolt for a toothpick.
We'll help you find your baby,
Dor said, grasping this positive mission with enthusiasm. Nothing like a little quest to restore spirits. Crunch's search for his little one had fizzled, so he had asked for help, and few human beings ever had such a request from an ogre. Grundy can ask living things, because he knows all their languages. And I'll ask the dead ones. We'll run him down in no time. Crunch heaved a grateful sigh that almost blew Dor down. Quickly they went to the spot where the tyke had last been seen. Smash had, Crunch explained, been innocently chewing up nails, getting his daily ration of iron, then must have wandered away.
Did the little ogre pass this way?
Dor asked a nearby rock.
Yes, he went toward that tree,
the rock replied.
Why don't you just have the ground tell you warm or cold?
Grundy suggested.
The ground is not an individual entity,
Dor answered.
It's just part of the whole land of Xanth. I doubt I could get its specific attention. Anyway, much of it is alive. Roots, bugs, germs, magic things. They mess up communication. There is a ridge of stone,
Grundy pointed out.
You could use it.
Good idea.
Tell me, warm or cold as I walk?
Dor told it, and started to walk toward the tree. Crunch followed as softly as he was able, so that the shuddering of the land did not quite drown out the rock's voice.
Warm, warm, cool, warm, the ridge called,
steering Dor on the correct course. Dor realized suddenly that he was, in fact, a magician. No one else could have accomplished such a search. Irene's plant-growing magic was a strong talent, a worthy one, but it lacked the versatility of this. Her green thumb could not be turned to non-botanic uses. A king, to rule Xanth, had to be able to exert his power effectively, as magician Trent did. Trent could transform any enemy into a toad, and everyone in Xanth knew that. But magician Trent was also smart. He used his talent merely to back up his brains and will. What could a girl like Irene do if she occupied the throne? Line the paths with shadowboxing plants? Dor's talent was far more effective. He could learn all the secrets anyone had except those never voiced or shown before an inanimate object. Knowledge was the root of power. Good magician Humphrey knew that.
That's a tangler,
Grundy hissed in his ear. Dor's attention snapped back to the surface. Good thing that Gollum had stayed with him, instead of questioning creatures on his own. Dor had been mindlessly reacting to the ridge's directives, and now stood directly before a medium-sized tangle tree, which was no doubt why Grundy had remained, knowing that Dor was prone to such carelessness. Little Smash had gone there.
I could ask it,
Grundy said,
but the tree would probably lie, if it didn't just ignore me. Plants don't talk much anyway.
Crunch stepped close. He roared, poking one club-like finger at the dangling tentacles. The message needed no translation. The Tangler gave a vegetable keen of fear and whipped its tentacles away. Dor, amazed, stepped forward.
warm,
The ridge said. Dor stepped nervously into the circle normally commanded by the Tangler.
cool,
The ridge said. So the little ogre had steered just clear of the tree and gone on. Close call for Tyke and tree. But now the trail led toward the deep cleft of a nickelpede warren. Nickelpedes would gouge discs out of the flesh of anything, even an ogre. But then the trail veered away. The ridge subsided, but there were a number of individual rocks in this vicinity, and they served as well. And on the trail went, meandering past a routine assortment of Xanth horrors. A needle cactus, the nest of a harpy, a poison spring, a man-eating violet flower. Fortunately, Smash had been no man, but an ogre, so the flower had turned purple in frustration. A patch of spear grass with its spear tips glinting evilly, plus similar threats with which the wilderness abounded. Smash had avoided stepping into any traps, until at last the Tyke had come to the lair of a flying dragon. Dor halted, dismayed. This time there was no doubt. No one passed this close to such a lair without paying the price. Dragons were the lords of the jungle. As a class, specific monsters might prevail against specific dragons, but overall, dragons governed the wilds much as man governed the tames. They could hear the dragon cubs entertaining themselves with some poor prey, happily scorching each potential route of escape. Dragon cubs needed practice to get their scorching up to par. A stationary target sufficed only up to a point. After that, they needed live lures to get their reflexes and aim properly tracked. Smash is there? Dor asked, dreading the answer.
hot,
The nearest stone agreed warmly. Crunch grimaced, and this time not even an ogress would have mistaken his ire. He stomped up to the scene of the crime. The ground danced under the impact of his footfalls, but the dragon's lair seemed secure. The lair's entrance was a narrow cleft that only the narrow torso of a small dragon could pass through. Crunch put one hand at each side of it and sent a brutal surge of power galumphing through his massive muscles. The rock split asunder, and suddenly entrance was ogre size. The dragons were exposed, in their conservative nest of diamonds and their heat-resistant jewels. The thing about fire-breathing dragons was that ordinary nest materials tend to burn up or melt or scorch unpleasantly, so diamonds were a dragon's best friend. A little ogre, no larger than Dor himself, stood amid 3 winged dragonettes while the dragon lady glared benignly on. The ogreling was stoutly structured and would probably have been a match for any single dragon his size, but the 3 were making things hot for him. There were scorch marks all about, though the little ogre seemed as yet unhurt. Dragons did like to play with their food before roasting it. Crunch did not even growl. He just leaned over and looked at the dragoness, and the smoke issuing from her mouth sank like chill fog to the floor. For Crunch massed as much as she did, and it would be redundant to specify the power-to-mass ratio of ogres. She was not up to his snuff, not even with a belly full of fuel. She never moved a muscle, petrified as if she had locked gazes with a gorgon. Now Smash advanced on one dragonette.
"Me tweak you tail, you big old snail!"
he cried gleefully. He hauled on the tail, swung the dragon around, and hurled it carelessly against the far wall. The second little dragon opened its mouth and wafted out a small column of flame. Smash exhaled with such force that the flame rammed right back inside the dragon, who was immediately overcome by a heated fit of coughing. The third dragonette, no coward, pounced on Smash with all 4 clawed feet extended. Smash raised one fist. The dragon landed squarely on it, its head and tail whipping around to smack into each other. It fell on the bed of diamonds, stunned. Even the littlest ogre was tougher than its weight in dragons, when the odds were evened. Dor had not believed this before. He had thought it was mere folklore.
"Now games are through. To home with you,"
Crunch said, reaching in to lift his son out of the lair by the tough scruff of the neck. With his other fist, Crunch struck the nest so hard that the diamonds bounced out in a cloud, scattering all over the landscape. The dragoness winced. She would have a tedious clean-up chore to do. Without a backward glance at her, they tramped away, except for Grundy, who couldn't resist putting in a last word.
"Good thing for you, you didn't hurt the tyke,"
he called to the dragon lady.
"If you had, Crunch might have gotten angry. You wouldn't like him when he's angry."
Fortunately, Crunch was now in a good mood.
"Little man, help we. How pay we fee?"
the ogre inquired of Dor. Abashed, Dor demurred.
"We were happy to help," he said. "We have to get home now."
Crunch considered. This took some time. He was big, but not smart. He addressed Grundy.
"Gollum tell true. What can me do?"
"Oh, Dor doesn't really need any help," Grundy said. "He's a magician."
Crunch swelled up ominously.
"Me get mad when truth not had."
Daunted, Grundy responded quickly.
"Well, the boys around Castle Roogna do tease Dor a little. He's not as big and strong as the big boys, but he has more magic, so they sort of—"
Crunch cut him off with an impatient gesture. The ogre picked Dor up gently in one huge hand, fortunately not by the scruff of the neck, and carried him north along the path. Such was the ogre's stride, they were very soon at the edge of the Castle Roogna orchard. He set Dor down and stood silently while Boy and Gollum proceeded forward. "Thanks for the lift," Thor said weakly. He was certainly glad this monster was a vegetarian. Crunch did not respond. Frozen in his hunched-over position, he most resembled the massive stump of a burned-out gnarlbole tree. Awkwardly, Thor went on toward his home, passing near the umbrella tree. As luck would have it, the two bullies were still there. Both jumped up when they saw him, and eager for sport, ran out to bar his way.
"The little snooper's back," Horsejaw cried. "What's he doing on a path meant for people?"
I wouldn't,
Grundy said warningly. For answer, a little snake landed on his head. A sonic boom went off behind Thor. The boys laughed coarsely. Then the ground shuddered. The bullies looked around wildly, fearing an avalanche from nowhere. There was another shudder, jarring Thor's teeth. It was the ogre tramping forward under full steam. Horsejaw's mouth fell open as he saw that monster bearing down on him. He was too startled to move. The other boy tried to run, but the ground shook so violently that he fell on his face and lay there. Several small snakes appeared, squiggled nervously, and vanished. No help there. If there were any more sonic booms, they were drowned out by the violence of the ogre's approach. Crunch strode up until he loomed over the small party, his thick torso dwarfing the slender metal trunk of a nearby ironwood tree.
"You're me friend,"
he thundered distinctly, and the umbrella tree collapsed into shambles with the vibration.
"Help me land."
Small cracks opened in the hard ground of the path, and somewhere a heavy branch crashed to the forest floor.
"If laugh at lad, me get mad."
And he swung one club-like fist around in a great circle, barely over Horsejaw's head, so that the wind made the bully's hair stand on end. At least, Thor thought it was the wind that did it. The boy looked terrified. The ogre's fist smashed into the trunk of the ironwood tree. There was a nearly deafening clang. A tubular section of iron sprang out, leaving the top of the tree momentarily suspended in air. Then it dropped heavily and fell over with a crash that made the ground shake once more. Ironwood was solid stuff. An acrid wisp of smoke wafted up from the stump. The top of it was glowing red with a white fringe, and part of it where the ogre's fist had touched had melted. Crunch selected a jagged splinter of iron, picked his teeth with it, and wheeled about. His monstrous horny toes gouged a furrow from the path in the process. He tramped thunderously back south, humming a merry tune of bloodshed. In a moment he was gone, but the vibration of the terrain took a long time to quiet. Away in the palace, there was a tinkling crash of a window shattering. Horsejaw stood looking at the iron stump. His eyes flickered momentarily to Thor, then back to the steaming metal. Then he fainted.
I don't think the boys will tease you so much anymore, Thor,
Grundy remarked gravely. End. Chapter 1 is down. Jeepers. So guys, was that a better pace? Definitely quicker through this one than previously. Previous chapters, with the Xanth books, it's taken me an hour and 10 minutes to get through. This one took about 50 minutes. And I would say it was probably a similar length to most of those. So definitely picked up the tempo a little bit, picked up the pace a little bit. Was this a better speed? For those of you guys who stuck with me here. Just Curious as to your feedback on it. Hopefully you find that it was so. Ah. Which is all that we could ask for. And again, either way, to those who have provided the feedback for me, first and foremost, the real Barbette, I must say thank you. Your feedback has been greatly appreciated. And I hope if there are things that I can continue to do to improve that that you come across, that you will feel okay with sharing them with me. If you guys don't, then I don't know what I need to do to improve necessarily. I mean, obviously practice makes things better, but unless you know what you're doing and practicing and working towards, you don't necessarily know what you need to do to work on. So again, a big thank you to everybody who has provided me the feedback that my pacing was a bit too slow on this. And I said, hopefully you guys found in chapter 1 that the pacing was much better because of that. And if you just happen to be joining now and you aren't sure what the hell I'm talking about, well, we're getting ready to start chapter 2. So, without ado, let's start into chapter 2. Chapter 2, Tapestry. Dor was not teased much anymore. No one wanted to upset his friend. But this hardly eased his unrest. The teasing had not bothered him as much as it had bothered Grundy. Dor had always known he could use his superior magic to bring others into line, if he really had to. It was his general isolation from others that weighed on him, and his new awareness of Millie the ghost. What a difference there was between a brat like Irene and a woman like Millie. Yet Irene was the one Dor was expected to get along with. It wasn't fair. He needed to talk with someone. His parents were approachable, but Chameleon varied so much in appearance and intellect that he never could be certain how to approach her, and Bink might not be sympathetic to this particular problem. Besides which, both of them were away on a trip to Mundania, on business for the king. The land of Xanth was busy establishing diplomatic relations with Mundania, and after the centuries of bad relations, this was a touchy matter, requiring the utmost finesse. So Dor's parents were out. Grundy would chat with him any time, but the former golem was apt to get too cute about other people's problems, such as calling Irene's green thumb talent Stinkfinger. Dor hardly blamed her for retaliating violently, inconvenient as it had been for him personally. Grundy cared, all right. That was how he had become real. A real living person. But he didn't really understand. Anyhow, he knew Dor too well. Dor's grandfather Roland, whose talent was the stun, the ability to freeze people immobile, was a good man to talk to. But he was at his home in the North Village. a good 2 days' travel across the gap. There was only one person Dor could approach who was human, competent, mature, discreet, male, and an equivalent magician. That was the king. He knew the king was a busy man. It seemed the trade arrangements with Mundania were constantly complex. And of course, there were many local problems to be handled. But King Trent always made time for Dor. Perhaps that was one root of Irene's hostility, which had spread to the queen and the palace personnel in insidious channels. Irene talked to her father less than Dor did, so Dor tried not to abuse his magician's privilege. But this time, he simply had to go. He picked Grundy up and marched to the palace. The palace was actually Castle Roogna. For many years it had been a castle that was not a palace, deserted and forlorn. But King Trent had changed that. Now it was the seat of government of Xanth, as it had been in its youth. Crombie the soldier stood guard at the drawbridge across the moat. This was mainly to remind visitors to stay clear of the water, because the moat monsters were not tame. One would think that was evident, but every few months some fool wandered too close, or tried to swim in the murky water, or even attempted to feed some tidbit to a monster by hand. Such attempts were invariably successful. Sometimes the monster got the whole person, sometimes only the hand. Crombie was asleep on his feet. Grundy took advantage of this to generate some humor at the soldier's expense.
Hey there, Birdbeak. How's the stinking broad?
One eye cracked open. Immediately, Grundy rephrased his greeting.
Hello, handsome soldier. How's the sweet wife?
Both eyes came open, rolling expressively.
Jewel as well. Cute and smelling like a rose, and too worn out to go to work today, I dare say. I had a weekend pass.
So, that was why the soldier was so sleepy. Crombie's wife lived in an underground cavern south of the Magic Dust Village. It was a long way to travel on short notice, but that was not exactly what Crombie meant. He had the royal travel conjure zap him to the caverns and back again when his pass expired. Crombie's fatigue was not from traveling.
A soldier really knows how to make a pass,
Grundy observed, with a smirk he thought Dor wouldn't understand. Dor understood, more or less. He just didn't see the humor in it.
That's for sure,
Crombie agreed heartily.
Women. I can take 'em or leave 'em. But my wife's a jewel of a nymph.
That had special meaning, too. Nymphs were ideally shaped female creatures of little intellect, useful primarily for man's passing entertainment. It was strange that Crombie had married one, but he had been under an omen of marriage, and Jewel was said to be a very special nymph, with unusual wit for the breed, who had an important job. Dor had asked his father about Jewel once, since none of the local artifacts knew about her, but Bink had answered evasively. That was part of the reason Dor didn't want to ask his father about Millie. Millie was nymph-like at times, and evasions were disquieting. Had there been something between? No, impossible. Anyway, this sort of information could not be elicited from inanimate objects. They did not understand living feelings at all. They were purely objective. Usually.
Watch out for the moat monsters,
Crombie warned dutifully.
They're not tame.
Slowly his eyelids sank. He was asleep again.
I'd sure like to watch one of his passes in a magic mirror,
Grundy said.
But it'd break the glass in the pattern of an X.
They went on into the palace. Suddenly a three-headed wolf stalked out before them, growling fiercely. Dor paused. Is that real? He murmured to the floor.
Nope.
the floor responded in an undertone. Relieved, Dor walked right into the wolf, and through it. The monster was mere illusion, a construct of the queen. She resented his presence here, and her illusions were so proficient that there was no direct way to tell them from reality except by touch, which might be dangerous if something happened not to be an illusion. But his magic nullified hers, as it usually did. She could never fool him for long.
Sorceresses shouldn't mess with magicians,
Grundy observed snidely, and the wolf growled in anger as it vanished. It was replaced by an image of the queen herself, regal in robe and crown. She always enhanced her appearance for company. She was sort of dumpy in real flesh.
My husband is occupied at the moment,
she said with exaggerated formality.
Kindly wait in the upstairs drawing room.
Then, under her breath, she added,
Better yet, wait in the moat.
The queen did not conceal her dislike of him, but she would not dare misrepresent the position of the king. She would inform Dor when the king was free.
Thank you, your highness,
Dor replied as formally as she had addressed him, and walked to the drawing room. Actually, the drawing room did not contain any drawings. Only one huge tapestry hung on the wall. This had once been a bedroom. Dor's father mentioned sleeping in it once, back before Castle Roogna was restored. In fact, Dor himself had slept in it earlier in life. He remembered being fascinated by the great tapestry. Now the bed had been replaced by a couch, but the tapestry remained as intriguing as ever. It was embroidered with scenes from the ancient past of Castle Roogna and its environs, 800 years ago. In one section was the castle, its battlements under construction by a herd of centaurs. In other sections were the deep wilderness of Xanth, the awful Gap Dragon, villages protected by stockades, such defenses were no longer used, and other castles. In fact, there were more castles than there were today. The more Dor looked at it, the more he saw, for the figures in the tapestry moved when watched. Since everything was more or less in proportion, the representations of men were tiny. The tip of his little finger could cover one of them over, but every detail seemed authentic. The whole lives of these people were shown, if one cared to watch long enough. Of course, their lives proceeded at the same rate contemporary lives did, so Dor had never seen a whole life pass. He would be an old man before that happened. And, of course, the process had to have some reasonable cessation, because otherwise the tapestry would long since have passed beyond the Castle Roogna stage and gotten right up to the present. So there were aspects of this magic Dor had not yet fathomed. He just had to accept what he saw. Meanwhile, the tapestry figures worked and slept and fought and loved in miniature. Memories flooded Dor. What adventures he had seen, years ago, riveted to this moving picture. Swordsmen and dragons and fair ladies and magic of every type, going on and on, but all in baffling silence. Without words, much of the action became meaningless. Why did this swordsman battle this dragon, yet leave that other dragon alone? Why did that chambermaid kiss this courtier and not that one, though that one was handsomer? Who was responsible for this particular enchantment? And why was that centaur so angry after a liaison with his filly? There was so much of it going on at once that it was hard to fathom any overall pattern. He had asked Millie about it, and she had gladly told him the valiant tales of her youth, for she had been young at the time of Castle Roogna's construction. But though her tales were more cohesive than those of the moving pictures of the tapestry, they were also more selective. Millie did not enjoy healthy bloodshed or deadly peril or violent love. She preferred episodes of simple joy and family accommodation. That sort of thing could get dull after a while. Also, she never talked about herself after she had left her native stockade. Nothing about her own life and loves, or how she'd become a ghost. She wouldn't tell how she had come to know the zombie Jonathan, though this could have happened quite naturally in the course of 8 centuries of lonely association in Castle Roogna. Dor wondered whether, if he should ever happen to be a ghost for 800 years, zombies might begin to look good to him. He doubted it. At any rate, his thirst for knowledge had been frustrated, and he had finally given it up. Why hadn't he simply made the tapestry itself talk to him, answering his questions? Dor didn't remember, so he asked the tapestry. "Please, explain the nature of your images."
"I can't," the tapestry replied. "They are as varied and detailed as life itself, not subject to interpretation by the likes of me."
There it was. When performing its given function, the tapestry was painstakingly apt, but when speaking as a piece of rug, it lacked the mind to fathom its own images. He could learn from it whether a fly had sat on it in the past hour, but not the motive of an 800 years gone magician. Now, as Dor contemplated the images, his old interest in history resurged. What a world that had been, back during the celebrated 4th wave of human colonization of Xanth. Then adventure had reigned supreme, not dullness, as in the present. A giant frog appeared.
"The king will see yon now, Master Dor," it croaked.
It was, of course, another illusion of Queen Iris's. She was forever showing off her versatility.
"Thanks, frog face,"
Grundy said. He always knew when he could slip in a healthy insult without paying for it.
"Catch any good flies in that big mouth of yours recently?"
The frog swelled up angrily, but could not protest lest it step, or hop, out of character. The queen disliked compromising her illusions.
"How's your mother, the toad?"
The golem continued blithely, the malice hardly showing in his tone.
"Did she ever clean up those purple warts on her?"
The frog exploded.
"Well, you didn't have to blow up at me,"
Grundy reproved the vanishing smoke.
"I was only being sociable, frog brain."
Dor, with superhuman effort, kept his face straight. The queen could still be watching, in the guise of a no-see-um gnat or something. There were times when Grundy's caustic wit got him into trouble, but it was worth it. The king's library was also upstairs, just a few doors down. That was where the king was always to be found when not otherwise occupied, and sometimes even when he was. It was not supposed to be generally known, but Dor had pried the news out of the furniture. Sometimes the queen made an image of the king in the library, at the king's behest, so he could interview some minor functionary when he was busy with more important things elsewhere. The king never did that with Dor, however. Dor proceeded directly to the library, noting a ghost flitting across the dusky hall farther down. Millie had been one of half a dozen ghosts, and the only one to be restored to life. The others still hovered about their haunts. Dor rather liked them. They were friendly, but rather shy, and were easily spooked. He was sure each had its story, but like Millie, they were diffident about themselves. He knocked at the library door.
"Come in, Dor,"
The king's voice answered immediately. He always seemed to know when Dor came calling, even when the queen was not around to inform him. Dor entered, suddenly shy. If you're not too busy." King Trent smiled.
"I am busy, Dor, but your business is important."
Suddenly, it hardly seemed so. The king was a solid, graying man old enough to be Dor's grandfather, yet still handsome. He wore a comfortable robe, somewhat faded and threadbare. He depended on the queen to garb him in illusion befitting whatever occasion occurred, so didn't need real clothes. At the moment he was highly relaxed and informal, and Dor knew this was intended to make Dor himself feel the same. I can come back another time. King Trent frowned. And leave me to pore over the next dull treaty amendment? My eyes are tired enough already. A stray bluebottle fly buzzed him, and absent-mindedly the king transformed it into a small bluebottle tree, growing from a crevice in the desk. Come, magician, let us chat for a while. How are things with you?
Well, we met a big frog,
Grundy began, but silenced instantly when the king glanced his way.
About the same,
Dor said. The king was giving him an opening. Why couldn't he speak his mind? Your cottage cheese still sound?
Oh, yes, the house is doing fine. Talks back quite a bit, though.
Inanity. I understand you made friends with Crunch the Ogre. Did the king know everything?
Yes, I helped find his child, Smash.
But my daughter Irene doesn't like you.
Not much.
Dor wished he had stayed home, but Dor found himself at a loss for a polite compliment. Irene was a pretty girl. Her father surely knew that already. She made plants grow, but she should have been more powerfully talented. She is young yet. However, even mature women are not always explicable. They seem to change overnight into completely different creatures. Grundy laughed.
That's for sure. Dor's sweet on Millie the Ghost.
Shut up, Dor cried in a fury of embarrassment. An exceptional woman, King Trent observed as he had not heard Dor's outcry. A ghost for 8 centuries, abruptly restored to life in the present. Her talent makes her unsuitable for normal positions around the palace, so she has served admirably as your governess at the cottage. Now you are growing up and must begin to train for adult responsibilities.
Adult?
Dor asked, still bemused by his shame. It was not the queen frog who had the big mouth. It was Grundy. You are the heir apparent to the throne of Xanth. Do not be concerned about my daughter. She is not magician level, and cannot assume the office unless there is no magician available, and then only on an interim basis until a magician appears, preserving continuity of government. Should I be removed from the picture in the next decade, you will have to take over. It is better that you are prepared. Suddenly the present seemed overwhelmingly real.
But I don't.
You have the necessary magic, Dor. You lack the experience and fortitude to use it properly. I would be remiss if I did not arrange to provide you with that experience.
But
no magician should require the services of an ogre to enforce his authority. You have not yet been hardened to the occasional ruthlessness required.
uh,
Dor knew his face was crimson. He had just received a potent rebuke and knew it was justified. For a magician to give way to the likes of Horsejaw? I believe you need a mission, Dor. A man's quest. One whose completion will demonstrate your competence for the office you are coming to. This had taken an entirely different tack than Dor had anticipated. It was as if the king had made his decision and summoned Dor for this directive, rather than merely granting an audience.
Maybe so.
Maybe so? For certain so. You hold Millie in respect, the king said, but you are aware that she is not of your generation, and has one great unmet need.
Jonathan, Dor said. She loves Jonathan the zombie.
He was almost indignant. Then I think the nicest thing anyone could do for her would be to discover a way to restore Jonathan to full life. Then, perhaps, the reason she loves him would become apparent.
But
Dor had to halt. He knew that Grundy's remarks were only the least of the ridicule that would be directed at him if he ever expressed any serious ideas of his own about Millie. She was an 800-year-old woman. He was just a boy. One way to stifle all speculation would be to give her what she most wanted, Jonathan, alive.
But how?
The king spread his hands. I do not know the answer, Dor, but there may be one who does. There was only one person in the land of Xanth who knew all the answers, the good magician Humphrey. But he was a sour old man who charged a year's service for each answer. Only a person of considerable determination and fortitude went to consult good magician Humphrey. Suddenly, Dor realized the nature of the challenge King Trent had laid down for him. First, he would have to leave these familiar environs and trek through the hazardous wilderness to the good magician's castle. Then he would have to force his way in to brace the magician. Then serve as year for the answer. Then use the answer to restore Jonathan to life, knowing that in doing so, he was abolishing any chance that Millie would ever... His mind balked. This was no quest. This was disaster. Ordinary citizens have only themselves to be concerned about, Trent said. A ruler must be concerned for the welfare of others as much as for himself. He must be prepared to make sacrifices, sometimes very personal ones. He may even have to lose the woman he loves and marry the one he doesn't love for the good of the realm. Give up Millie? Marry Irene? Dor rebelled, then realized that the king had not been talking about Dor, but about himself. Trent had lost his wife and child in Mundania, and then married the sorceress Iris, whom he never professed to love, and had a child by her, for the good of the realm. Trent asked nothing of any citizen he would not ask of himself.
I will never be the man you are, Dor said humbly.
The king rose, clapping him on the back so that Grundy almost fell off his shoulder. Trent might be old, but he was still strong. I was never the man I am, he said. A man is only the man he seems to be. Inside, where no one sees, he may be a mass of gnawing worms of doubt and ire and grief. He paused reflectively as he showed Dor firmly to the doorway. No challenge is easy. The measure of the challenge a man rises to at need is a measure of the man. I proffer you a challenge for a magician and a king. Dor found himself standing in the hall, still bemused. Even Grundy was silent. Good magician Humphrey's castle was east of Castle Roogna, not far as the dragon flew, but more than a day's journey through the treacherous wilderness for a boy on foot. There was no enchanted path to Humphrey's retreat, because the magician abhorred company. All paths led away only. Dor could not be sent there instantly by spell, because this was his quest, his private, personal challenge, to accomplish by himself. Dor started in the morning, using his talent to solve part of the problem of travel.
Stones, give me a warning whistle whenever I approach anything dangerous to me, and let me know the best route to the good magician's castle.
We can tell you what is dangerous, the rocks chorused.
There was no stony silences for him.
But we don't know where the good magician's castle is. He has strewn little forget spells all over.
He should have known.
I've been there, Grundy offered. It's not far south of the gap. Bear north toward the gap, then east, then south to his castle. And I'm off. And if I'm off, I miss it. Where will I wind up? Dor inquired sourly. In the belly of a dragon, most likely.
Dor bore north, heeding the whistles. Most citizens of Xanth did not know the gap's existence, because it had been enchanted into anonymity. But Dor had lived all his life in this neighborhood, and visited the chasm several times. Warned by his talent, he steered clear of diversions such as dragon runs, tangled trees, antlion prides, choke nettles, sawgrass, and other threats. Only his father Bink could traverse the wilderness alone with greater equanimity, and maybe King Trent himself. Still, Grundy was nervous.
If you don't live to be king, I'll be in big trouble, he remarked,
not entirely humorlessly. When they got hungry, the stones directed them to the nearest breadloaf trees, soda poppies, and jelly barrel trunks. Then on as the day waned.
Say, Grundy exclaimed, there are one-way paths from Humphrey's castle to the gap. We're bound to cross one. The stones will know where such a path is, because they will have seen people walking along them. The forget spells are just about the location of the magician's castle, not about stray people, so we can bypass them. Right, Dor agreed. Stones, have any of you seen such travel?
There was a chorus of no's, but he kept checking as he progressed, and in due course found some stones that had indeed observed such travelers. After some experimentation, he managed to get aligned with the path, and took a step toward the chasm. There it was, suddenly, a clear path leading to a bridge that seemed to span the full width of the gap. But when he faced the other way, there was only jungle. Fascinating magic, these paths.
Maybe if you walk backwards, Grundy suggested. But then I'd stumble into all sorts of things. Well, you walk forward, and I'll face backward and keep an eye on the path.
They tried that, and it worked. The stones gave general guidance, and Grundy warned him whenever he drifted to one side or another. They made good progress, for, of course, the path was charmed, with no serious hazards in its immediate vicinity. But it had taken some time to find it, and when dark closed in, they were still in the wilderness. Fortunately, they located a pillow bush and fashioned a bed of multicolored pillows, setting out sputtering bug bombs from a bug bomb weed to repel predatory insects. They didn't worry about rain. Dor called out to a passing cloud, and it assured him that the clouds were all resting tonight, saving up for a blowout 2 days hence. In the morning, they feasted on boys and girls' berries. The seeds like tiny boys a bit strong, and the jelly girls a bit sweet, so that they had to be taken together for full enjoyment. They washed the berries down with the juice from punctured coffee beans and took up the march again. Dor felt somewhat stiff. He wasn't used to this amount of walking.
Funny, I feel fine,
Grundy remarked. He, of course, had ridden Dor's shoulder most of the way. Another friendly cloud advised them when the magician's castle was in sight. Humphrey had not thought to put forget spells on the clouds, or perhaps had found it impractical, since clouds tended to drift constantly. As it was, Dor realized he was fortunate these were good-natured cumulus clouds, instead of the bad-tempered thunderheads. By mid-morning they were there. The castle was small but pretty, with round turrets stretching up beyond the battlements, and a cute blue moat. Within the moat swam a triton, a handsome man with a fish's tail carrying a wicked triple-tipped spear. He glared at the intruders.
I think our first hurdle is upon us, Grundy remarked. That merman is not about to let us pass.
How did you get past when you came to ask a question? Dor asked.
That was a dozen years ago. It's all been changed. I snuck by a carnivorous seaweed in the moat and climbed a slippery glass wall and outsmarted a sword swallower inside.
A sword swallower? How could he hurt you?
He burped.
Dor thought about that and smiled. But the golem was right. Past experience was no aid to the present. Not while the good magician's defenses kept changing. He put a foot forward to touch the surface of the water. Immediately the Triton swam forward, head and arm raised, trident poised. It is only fair to warn ye, intruder, that I have 5 notches on my spear shaft. Dor jerked back his foot.
How do I get past this monster? He asked, staring into the moat. I'm not allowed to tell you that, the water replied apologetically. The old gnome's got everything counterspelled.
He would,
Grundy grumbled.
You can't out-gnome a gnome in his own home.
But there is a way, Dor said. We just have to figure it out. That's the challenge.
Well, the magician turtle's inside, waiting to see if we'll make it or get speared. He's got a sense of humor like that of a tangle tree.
Dor made as if to dive into the moat. The Triton raised his trident again. The merman's arm was muscular, and as he supported his body well out of the water, the points of his weapon glinted in the sun. Dor backed off again.
Maybe there's a tunnel under the moat,
Grundy suggested. They walked around the moat. At one point there was a metallic plaque inscribed with the words, "Trespassers will be prosecuted."
I don't know what that means,
Dor complained.
I'll translate,
Grundy said.
It means keep out.
I wonder if it means more, Dor mused. Why should Humphrey put a sign out here when there's no obvious way in anyway? Why say it in language only a golem understands? That doesn't seem to make sense. Which means it probably makes a lot of sense if you interpret it correctly.
I don't know why you're fulminating about a stupid sign when you need to be figuring out how to cross the moat.
Now, if there were a tunnel that the magician could use without running afoul of his own hazards, he'd need a marked place for it to emerge, Dor continued. Naturally, he wouldn't want anyone else using it without his permission, so we might cover it over and put a stay-away spell on it, like this.
No, I think you've got a brain after all,
Grundy admitted.
But you'd have to have a counterspell to get it open, and it's not allowed to tell you that secret.
But it's only a stone, not too bright. We might be able to trick it.
I get you. Let's try a dialogue. Know what I mean?
They had played this game before. Dor nodded, smiling. They stepped up close to the plaque.
Good morning, plaque, Dor greeted it.
Not to you, it ain't, the plaque responded. I ain't gonna tell you nothing.
That's because you don't know nothing,
Grundy said loudly, with a fine sneer in his voice.
I do not know nothing.
My friend claims you have no secrets to divulge.
Your friend's a dun.
The plaque says you're a dun, Dor informed Grundy.
Yeah? Well, the plaque's a dum-dum.
Plaque, my friend says you're a...
I am not.
The plaque retorted angrily.
He's the dum-dum.
What feelings objects had tended to be superficial.
He doesn't have my secret.
What secret, Dodo?
Grundy demanded, his voice even more heavily freighted with sneer than before.
My secret chamber, that's what. He doesn't have that, does he?
Nobody has that,
Grundy cried, scowling.
You're just making that up so we won't think you're the granite head you really are.
Is that so? Well, look at that. Duh.
And the face of the plaque swung open to reveal an interior chamber. Inside was a small box. Dor reached in and snatched out the box before the plaque caught on to its mistake.
And what have we here? He inquired gleefully.
Give me that back, the plaque cried. It's mine, all mine.
Dor studied the box. On the top was a button marked with the words, "Don't push." He pushed it. The lid sprang up. A snake-like thing leaped out, startling Dor, who dropped the box.
Ha 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 ha!
It bellowed. The snake thing landed on the ground, its energy spent.
Jack at your service, it said. Jack in the box. You sure look foolish.
A golem,
Grundy said.
I should have known. Golems are insufferable.
You ought to know, Pinhead,
Jack retorted. He reached into a serpentine pocket and drew out a shiny disc.
Here is an achievement button to commemorate the occasion.
He held it up. Dor reached down and took the button. It had two faces. On one side it said trespasser. On the other side it said persecuted. Dor had to laugh ruefully.
I guess I fell for it. That's what I get for seeking the easy way through.
He put the button against his shirt where it stuck magically, persecuted side out. Then he picked up the jack, put him back in the box, closed the lid, set the works back inside the plaque's chamber, and closed that.
Well played, plaque, he said.
Yeah,
the plaque agreed, mollified. They returned their attention to the moat.
No substitute for my own ingenuity, Dor said. But this diversion has given me a notion. If we can be tricked by a decoy...
I don't see what you're up to,
Grundy said.
That Triton knows his target.
That Triton thinks he knows his target. Watch this.
And Dor squatted by the water and said to it,
I shall make a wager with you, water. I bet you can't imitate my voice.
Yeah?
The water replied, sounding just like Dor.
Hey, that's pretty good for a beginner. But you can't do it in more than one place at a time.
That's what you think,
the water said in Dor's voice from two places.
You're much better than I thought,
Dor confessed ruefully.
But the real challenge is to do it so well that a third party could not tell which is me and which is you. I'm sure you couldn't fool that Triton, for example.
That wetback,
the water demanded. What do you want to bet, sucker?
That water's calling you a kind of fish,
Grundy muttered. Dor considered.
Well, I don't have anything you would value, unless that's it. You can't talk to other people, but you still need some way to show them your prowess. You could do that with this button.
He brought up the trespasser persecuted button, showing both sides.
See, it says what you do to intruders. You could flash it from your surface in sinister warning. You're on, the water said eagerly. You hide, and if old 3-Point follows my voice instead of you, I win the prize. Right, Dor agreed. I really hate to risk an item of this value, but then I don't think I'm going to lose it. You distract him, and I'll hide under your surface. If he can't find me before I drown, the button's yours. Hey, there's a flaw in that logic, Grundy protested. If you drown... Hello, Fishtail, a voice cried from the far side of the moat. I'm the creep from the jungle. The Triton, who had been viewing the proceedings without interest, whirled.
Another one?
Dor slipped into the water, took half a breath, and dived below the surface. He swam vigorously, feeling the cool flow across his skin. No trident struck him. As his lungs labored painfully against his locked throat, he found the inner wall of the moat and thrust his head up. He gasped for breath, and so did Grundy, still clinging to his shoulder. The Triton was still chasing here and there, following the shifting voices.
Over here, shark snoot. No here, mer thing. Are you blind, fish face?
Dor heaved himself out.
Safe, he cried. You win, Moat. Here's the prize. It hurts awfully to lose it, but you sure showed me up. And he flipped the button into the water. Anytime, sucker, the water replied smugly.
The significance of Grundy's prior comments sank in belatedly. A sucker was a kind of fish, prone to fasten to the legs of swimmers. But he hoped there were none here. The decoy voices subsided. The Triton looked around, spotting him with surprise. How did you do that? I chased you all over the moat.
You sure did, Dor agreed. I'm really breathless.
You some kind of magician or something?
That describes it.
Oh. The Triton swam away, affecting loss of interest. The second challenge was now before them. There was a narrow ledge of stone between the moat and the castle wall. Dor found no obvious entry to the castle.
It's always this way,
Grundy said wisely.
A blank wall, inanimate object. But the worst is always inside. Good to know,
Dor said, feeling a chill that was not entirely from his soaking clothing. He was beginning to appreciate the depth of the challenge King Trent had made for him. At each stage he was forced to question his ability and his motive. Were the risk and effort worth the prize? He had never been exposed to a sustained challenge of this magnitude before, where even his talent could help him only deviously. With the counterspells against things giving away information, he was forced to employ his magic very cleverly, as with the moat. Maybe this was the necessary course to manhood, but he would much prefer to have a safe route home. He was, after all, only a boy. He didn't have the mass and thews of a man, and certainly not the courage. Yet here he was, and he had better go forward, because the Triton would hardly let him go back. The mass and thews of a man. The notion appealed insidiously. If by some magic he could become bigger and stronger than his father, and be skilled with the sword, so that he didn't have to have an ogre backing him up, then wouldn't his problems be over? No more weaseling about, using tricks to sneak by Tritons, arguing with plaques. But this was foolish, wishful thinking. He would never be such a man, even when full grown. Full grown, he muttered, appreciating the morbid pun. Maybe he would have made a good zombie. They circled the castle again. At intervals there were alcoves with plants growing in them, decorating the blank wall. But they weren't approachable plants. stinkweeds, skunk cabbages, poison ivy. The last flipped a drop of glistening poison at him, but he avoided it. The drop struck the stone ledge and etched a smoking hole in it. Another alcove held a needle cactus, one of the worst plant menaces of all. Dor hastened on past that one, lest the ornery vegetable elect to fire a volley of needles at him.
You climbed a wall of glass?
Dor inquired skeptically, contemplating the blank stone. He was not a good climber, and there were no handholds, steps, or other aids.
I was a golem then, a construct of string gunk. It didn't matter if I fell. I wasn't real. I existed only to do translations. Today I could not climb that glass wall, or even this stone wall. I have too much reality to lose.
Too much reality to lose. That made sense. Dor's own reality became more attractive as he pondered the possible losing of it. Why was he wishing for a hero's body and power? He was a magician, probable heir to the throne. Strong men were common. Magicians were rare. Why throw that away for a zombie? Then he thought of lovely Millie, to do something nice for her, make her grateful. Ah, foolishness. But it seemed he was also that kind of fool. Maybe it came with growing up, her talent of sex appeal. Dor tapped at the stone. It was distressingly solid. No hollow panels there. He felt for crevices. The interstices between stones were too small for his fingers, and he already knew there were no ledges for climbing.
Gotta be in one of those alcoves, he said.
They checked the alcoves carefully. There was nothing. Nauseous plants grew from stone planters sitting on the rampart. There was no secret entrance through their dirt. But the niche of the needle cactus seemed deeper. In fact, it curved into darkness beyond the cactus. Passage. Now all he had to do was figure out how to pass one of the deadliest of the medium-sized plants of Xanth. Needle cactuses tended to shoot first and consider afterward. Even a tangled tree would probably give way to a needler if they grew side by side. Chester the centaur, a friend of Dor's father, still had puncture scars marring his handsome rump where a needler had chastened him. Dor poked his head cautiously around the corner.
I don't suppose you feel like letting a traveler pass? He inquired without much hope.
A needle shot directly at his face. He jerked violently back, and it hissed on out to land in the moat. There was an irate protest from the Triton, who didn't like having his residence littered.
The needler says no,
Grundy translated gratuitously.
I could have guessed.
How was he going to pass this hurdle? He couldn't swim under this cactus, or reason with it, or avoid it. There was barely room to squeeze by it, in the confined alcove.
Maybe loop it with a rope and haul it out of the way,
Grundy suggested dubiously.
We don't have a rope, Dor pointed out, and nothing to make one with. I know someone whose talent is making ropes from water, Grundy said. So he could pass this menace. We can't. And if we did have rope, we'd get needled the moment we hauled the cactus out into the open. Unless we yanked it right into the moat.
Dor chuckled at the thought. Then he got serious.
Could we fashion a shield? Nothing to fashion it from. Same problem as the rope. The ledge is barren. Now, if cacti don't like water at all, maybe we can scoop. They can live without it, but they like it fine, Dor said. They get rained on all the time, just so long as it doesn't flood too much. Splashing won't do any good unless...
He paused, considering.
If we could send a lot of water flowing through there, flood out the cactus, wash the dirt from its pot, expose the roots. How?
Dor sighed.
No way, without a bucket. We just aren't set up to handle this cactus. Yeah, a fire drake could handle it. Those plants don't like fire. It burns off their needles. Then they can't fight until they grow new ones, and that takes time. But we don't have any fire.
He shook a few drops from his body.
Sometimes I wish you had a more physical magic door. If you could point your finger and paralyze or stun or burn, then the good magician would have had other defenses for his castle that those talents would be useless against. Magic is not enough. You have to use your brains. How can a brain stop a needler from needling? Grundy demanded. The thing isn't smart. You can't make a deal with it. The cactus isn't smart, Dor repeated, an idea forming, so it might not grasp what would be obvious to us. Whatever you're talking about is not obvious to me either, the golem said. Your talent is translation. Can you talk cactus language too? Of course. But what has that to do with? Suppose we told it we were dangerous to it, that we were salamanders, burning hot, about to burn it down. Wouldn't work. It might be scared, but all it would do would be to fire off a volley of needles to kill the salamander before the creature could get close. Yes. But what about something that isn't threatening, but was still sort of dangerous? A fireman, maybe, just passing through with flame on low. Grundy considered. That might just work, but if it failed... Doom, Dor finished. We'd be pincushions. Both looked back at the moat. The Triton was watching them alertly. Pincushions either way, Grundy said. I sure wish we were heroes, instead of golems and boys. We're not cut out for this sort of thing. The longer we stand here, the more scared I get. Dor agreed. So let's get on with it before I start crying, he added, and wished he hadn't phrased it quite that way. Grundy looked at the needle cactus again. When I was a real golem, a little thing like a needler couldn't hurt me. I wasn't real. I felt no pain. But now, I'm too scared to know what to say. I'll risk it. It's my quest, after all. You don't have to participate. I don't know why you're risking yourself here anyway. Because I care, you twit. Which had to be true. Okay, you just translate what I say into cactus talk. Dor nerved himself again and walked slowly toward the vegetable monster. Say something! Say something! Grundy cried, as needles oriented on them visibly, ready to fly off their handles. I am a fireman, Dor said uncertainly. I am made of fire. Anything that touches me gets burned to a crisp. This is my fire dog, Grundy the Growler. I am just taking my hot dog for a walk, just passing through, chewing idly on a firecracker. I love crackers. Grundy made a running series of scrapes and whistles, as of wind blowing through erect cactus needles. The needler seemed to be listening. There was an alert quiver about its needles now. Could this possibly work? We are merely passing through, Dor continued. We aren't looking for trouble. We don't like to burn off needles unless we really have to, because they scorch and pop and smell real bad. He saw some needles wilt as Grundy translated. The message was getting through. We have nothing against cactuses, so long as they keep their place. Some cactuses are very nice. Some of Grundy's best friends are cactuses.
He likes to. Dor paused. What would a fire dog do with a compatible cactus? Water it down, of course. With a stream of fire? That wouldn't go over well here. He likes to sniff their flowers as he dog trots by. We only get upset if any needles happen to get in our way. When we get upset, we get very hot. Very, very hot. In fact, we just get all burned up. He decided not to overdo it, lest he lose credibility. But we aren't too hot right now, because we know no nice cactus would try to stick us, so we won't have to burn off any inconvenient needles. The cactus seemed to withdraw into itself, giving them room to pass without touching. His ploy was working. My, these firecrackers are good. Would you like a cracker, cactus? He held out one hand. The cactus gave a little keen of apprehension, much as a tangler had when Crunch the ogre growled at it. The needles shied away. Then Dor was past it, penetrating into the alcove passage. But he was still within range of the needler, so he kept talking. After all, if the thing caught on to his ruse, it would be a very angry cactus. Sure was nice meeting you, Cactus. You're a real sharp creature. Not like the one I encountered the other day, who tried to put a needle in my back. I fear I lost my temper. Tempering takes a lot of heat. I fired up like a wounded salamander, and I went back and hugged that poor cactus till all its needles burst into flame. The scorch marks are still on it, but I'm happy to say that it will probably survive. Lucky it was a wet day, raining in fact, so my heat only cooked its outer layers some instead of setting the whole thing on fire. I'm sorry I did that. I really think that needle in the back was an accident, something that just slipped out. I just can't help myself when I get hot. He rounded the curve in the passage so that he was no longer in view of the needler. Then he leaned against the wall, feeling faint. Grundy's translation came to an end.
You're the best liar I've ever seen,
he said admiringly. I'm the scaredest liar you've ever seen.
Well, I guess it takes practice, but you did well. I could hardly keep up with those whoppers. But I knew if I cracked a smile, I'd really get needled.
Dor pondered the implications. He had indeed achieved his victory by lying. Was that the way it should be? He doubted it. He made a mental resolution. No more lying. Not unless absolutely necessary. If a thing could not be accomplished honestly, perhaps it wasn't worth accomplishing at all. I never realized what a coward I was, Dor said, changing the subject slightly. I'll never grow up.
I'm a coward too,
Grundy said consolingly.
I've never been so scared since I turned real.
One more challenge to handle. The worst one. I wish I were man-sized and man-couraged.
Me too,
the golem agreed. The passage terminated in a conventional door with a conventional door latch. Here we come, ready or not, Dor muttered.
You're not ready,
the door replied. Dor ignored it. He worked the latch and opened the door. There was a small room paneled in bird-of-paradise feathers. A woman of extraordinary perfection stood watching them. She wore a low-cut gown, jeweled sandals, a comprehensive kerchief, and an imported pair of mundane dark glasses. "Welcome, guests," she breathed, in such a way that Dor's gaze was attracted to the side of breathing, right where the gown was cut lowest yet fullest. Thanks," Dor said, nonplussed. This was the worst hazard of all? He needed no adult male vision to see that it was a hazard few men would balk at.
There's something about her I don't like this,
Grundy whispered in his ear.
I know her from somewhere.
Here, let me have a look at you,
the woman said, lifting her hand to her glasses. Dor's glance was drawn away from her torso to her face. Her hair began to move under her kerchief, as if separately alive. Grundy stiffened.
Close your eyes, he cried. I recognize her now. Those serpent locks. That's the Gorgon.
Dor's eyes snapped closed. He barged ahead, trying to get out of the room before any accident caused him to take an involuntary look. He knew what the Gorgon was. Her glance turned men to stone, if they met that glance with their own. His blindly moving feet tripped over a step, and Dor fell headlong. He threw his arms up to shield his face, but did not open his eyes. He landed jarringly and lay there, eyelids still tightly screwed down. There was a swish of long skirts coming near.
"Get up, young man," the
Gorgon said. Her voice was deceptively soft.
No, Dor cried. I don't want to turn to stone.
You won't turn to stone. The hurdles are over. You have won your way into the castle of the good magician Humphrey. No one will harm you here.
Go away, he said. I won't look at you.
She sighed, very femininely.
Gollum, you look at me. Then you can reassure your friend.
I don't want to be stone either,
Grundy protested.
I had too much trouble getting real to throw it away now. I saw what happened to all those men your sister, the siren, lured to your island.
And you also saw how the good magician nullified me. There is no threat now.
That's right. But how do I know the spell's still on? It's been a long time since.
Take this mirror and look at me through the reflection first, she said. Then you will know.
I can't handle a big mirror. I'm only inches tall. Oh, what's the use? Dor, I'm going to look at her. If I turn to stone, you'll know she can't be trusted. Grundy, don't. I already have, the golem said, relieved. It's all right, Dor. You can look.
Grundy had never deceived him. Dor clenched his teeth and cracked open an eye, seeing the lighted room and the Gorgon's nearest foot. It was a very pretty foot, with fluorescently tinted toenails, topped by a shapely ankle. Funny how he had never noticed ankles before. He got to his hands and knees, his eyes traveling cautiously up her marvelously molded legs, until the view was cut off by the hem of her gown. It was a shapely gown, too, slightly translucent so that the suggestion of her legs continued on up to... But enough of this stalling. He forced his reluctant eyes to travel all the way up past her contours until they approached her head. Her hair, now unbound, consisted of a mass of writhing little snakes. They were appealingly horrible, but the face was nothing, just a vacuum, as if the head were a hollow ball with the front panel removed. But I saw your face before, all except the eyes.
You saw this mask of my face, she said, holding it up, and the dark glasses. There was never any chance for you to look into my true face.
So it seemed. Then why?
To scare you off. If you lacked the courage to do what is necessary in order to reach the good magician.
I just closed my eyes and ran,
Dor said.
But you ran forward, not back.
So he had. Even in his terror, he had not given up his quest. Or had he merely run whichever way he happened to be facing? Dor wasn't sure. He considered the Gorgon again. Once he got used to the anomaly of her missing face, he found her quite attractive.
But what is a Gorgon doing here?
I am serving my year's fee, awaiting my answer.
Dor shook his head, trying to get this straight.
If I may ask, what was your question?
I asked the good magician if he would marry me.
Dor choked.
He made you serve a fee for that?
Oh, yes. He always charges a year's service, or the equivalent. That's why he has so much magic around the castle. He's been in this business for a century or so.
I know that, but yours was a different kind of.
She seemed to smile behind her invisibility.
No exceptions, except maybe on direct order from the king. I don't mind. I knew what to expect when I came here. Soon my year will be finished, and I will have my answer.
Grundy shook his head.
I thought the little gnome was nuts, but he's crazy.
By no means, the Gorgon said. I could make him a pretty good wife, once I learn the ropes. He may be old, but he's not dead, and he needs.
I meant to make you work a year. Why doesn't he just marry you and have your service for life?
You want me to ask him a second question, and serve another year for an answer? She demanded.
No, I was just curious. I don't really understand the good magician.
You and everyone else, she agreed wryly.
And Dor began to feel an affinity for this shapely, faceless female.
But slowly, I'm learning his ways. It is a good question you raise. I shall have to think about it, and maybe I can figure out that answer for myself. If he wants my service, why would he settle for a year of it when he could readily have it all? If he doesn't want my service, why not send me out to guard the moat or something, where he won't have to see me every day? There has got to be a reason.
She scratched her head, causing several snakes to hiss warningly.
And do you even want to marry him? Grundy asked. He's such a gloomy old gnome. He's no prize for a woman, especially a pretty one.
Who said I wanted to marry him?
Grundy did a rare double take.
Your question.
That is for information column. Once I know whether he will marry me, I'll be able to decide whether I should do it. It's a difficult decision.
Agreed, Grundy said. King Trent must have labored similarly before marrying Queen Iris.
Do you love him? Dor inquired.
Well, I think I do. You see, he's the first man who ever associated with me without, you know.
She nodded her head toward the corner. There was a statue of a man, carved beautifully in marble.
That's?
Dor asked, alarmed.
No, I really am a statue, the stone answered him. A fine original work of sculpture.
Humphrey won't let me do any real conversions, the Gorgon said. Not even for old time's sakes. I'm just here to identify the foolish. or to scare off the faint-hearted. The magician won't answer cowards."
Then he won't answer me, Dor said sadly. I was so scared.
No, that's not cowardice. Being terrified but going ahead and doing what must be done. That's courage. The one who feels no fear is a fool, and the one who lets fear rule him is a coward. You are neither. Same for you, Gollum. You never deserted your friend, and were willing to risk your precious flesh body to help him. I think the magician will answer.
Thor considered that.
I sure don't feel very brave, he said at last. All I did was hide my face.
I admit it would have been more impressive had you closed your eyes and fenced with me blind, she said, or snatched up a mirror to use. We keep several handy, for those who have the wit to take that option. But you're only a boy. The standards are not as strict.
Yes, Dor agreed, still not pleased.
You should have seen me when I came here, she said warmly. I was so frightened I hid my face, just as you did.
If you didn't hide your face, you'd turn everyone to stone, Grundy pointed out.
That, too, she agreed.
Say, Grundy demanded, it was 12 years ago when you met the good gnome. I was there, remember? How come you're just now asking your question?
I left my island at the time of no magic, she said frankly. Suddenly, no magic worked at all in the whole land of Xanth, and the magic things were dying or turning mundane, and all the old spells were undone. I don't know why that was.
I know, Grundy said, but I can't tell, except to say it won't happen again.
All my former conquests reverted to life. There were some pretty rowdy men there, you know, trolls and things. So I got all flustered and fled. I was afraid they would hurt me.
That was a sensible fear, Grundy said. When they didn't catch you, they went back to the magic dust village, where most of them had come from. But I guess they're still there. Lot of eager women in that village, after all that time with all their men gone.
But when the magic came back, the magician's spell on my face was gone. It was one of the one-shot variety that carried only until interrupted. A lot of spells are like that, mine included. So I had my face again, and you know.
Dor knew. She started making statues again.
By then, I knew what was happening, she continued. I had been pretty naive there on my isolated island, but I was learning. I really didn't want it to be that way. So I remembered what Humphrey had said about Mundania, where magic doesn't ever work. That certainly must be a potent counterspell laid on that land. And I went there. And he was right. I was a normal girl. I had thought I could never stand to leave there. But the time of no magic showed me that maybe I could stand it after all. And when I tried, I could. It was sort of strange and fun, not nearly as bad as I had feared. People accepted me, and men. Do you know I'd never kissed a man in Xanth?
Dor was ashamed to comment he had never kissed a woman other than his mother, who of course didn't count. He thought fleetingly of Millie.
But after a while I began to miss Xanth. the Gorgon continued. The magic, the special creatures. Do you know I even got to miss the tangle trees? When you're born to magic, you can't just set it aside. It is part of your being. So I had to come back. But that meant, you know, more statues. So I went to Humphrey's castle. By that time I knew he was a good magician. He never told me that when we met. And that he wasn't all that approachable. And I got girlishly nervous. I knew that if I wanted to be with a man in Xanth, man to woman, it would have to be one like him, who had the power to neutralize my talent. The more I thought about it, well, here I am.
Didn't you have trouble getting into the castle?
Oh, yes, it was awful. There was this foghorn guarding the moat, and I found this little boat there. But every time I tried to cross, that horn blasted out such columns of fog that I couldn't see or hear anything, and the boat always turned around and came back to shore. It was a magic boat, you see. You had to steer it, or it went right back to its dock. I got all covered in fog, and my hair was hissing something awful. It doesn't like that sort of thing. Her hair, of course, consisted of myriad tiny snakes or eels. They were rather cute, now that he was getting used to the style.
How did you get across the moat, then?
I finally got smart. I steered the boat directly toward the foghorn. No matter how bad the fog got, it was like swimming through a waterfall. When I reached the horn, I was across, because it was inside, not outside.
Oops, the gnome cometh,
Grundy said. Oh, I must get back to work, the Gorgon said, hastily tripping out of the room. I was in the middle of the laundry when you arrived. He uses more socks. She was gone.
Gnomes do have big dirty feet, Grundy remarked. Sort of like goblins in that respect.
The good magician Humphrey walked in. He was indeed gnome-like, old and gnarled and small. His feet were big and bare and, yes, dirty.
There's not a clean pair of socks in the whole castle,
he grumped.
Girl, haven't you done that laundry yet? I asked for it an hour ago.
Good magician,
Dor said, moving toward him.
It isn't as if socks are that complicated to wash,
Humphrey continued irritably.
I've shown her the cleaning spell.
He looked around.
Where is that girl? Does she think the whole land of Xanth is made of stone, merely waiting on her convenience?
Good magician Humphrey, Dor said, trying again. I have come to ask.
I can't stand another minute without my socks,
Humphrey said, sitting down on the step.
I'm no barefoot boy anymore, and even when I was, I always wore shoes. I spilled an itching powder formula here once, and it gets between my toes. If that fool girl doesn't.
Hey, old gnome,
Grundy bawled deafeningly. Humphrey glanced at him in an offhand way.
Oh, hello, Grundy. What are you doing here? Didn't I tell you how to become real?
I am real, gnome,
Grundy said.
I'm just speaking your language, as is my talent. I'm here with my friend Dor, showing him how to get a magician's attention.
Dor doesn't need a magician's attention. He's a magician himself. He needs a quest. He ought to go find the secret of making zombies human, so he can please Millie the ghost. Besides, I'm not dressed for company. My socks.
To hell with your socks,
Grundy exclaimed.
the boys come all the way here to ask how to get that secret, and you have to give him an answer.
To hell with my socks. Not before they're clean. I wouldn't be caught dead in dirty socks.
All right, gnome. I'll fetch your socks,
Grundy said.
You stay right here on this step and talk to Door, okay?
He jumped down and scurried from the room. I'm sorry, Door began hesitantly.
It did take Grundy some time to get the message, but the cranial capacity of golems is very small. Now that he has left us alone, I can convey private reflections.
Oh, I don't mind, Grundy.
The fact is, Thor, you are slated to be the next king of Xanth. Now, I suppose I could charge you the usual fee for my answer, but that would be impolitic if you were to become king before I died. My references suggest that will be the case. One can never be absolutely sure about the future, of course. The future history texts misrepresent it almost as much as the past history texts do the past. But why gamble foolishly? You are a fool magician in your own right, with power as great as mine, and of a similar genre. Given time, you will know as much as I. It becomes expedient to deal with fellow magicians on an equal basis. Besides which, a year out of your life at this stage might in some devious way pose a threat to the welfare of your father, Bink, who cares greatly for you, and that would be an unconscionable mischief. I remember when I was attempting to fathom his talent, and the invisible giant came marching by with a tread worse than an ogre's, and almost shook down the castle. But that's another matter. In this case, I cannot provide your full answer anyway, because there is an ambiguity in the record. It seems it is a trade secret kept by another magician. Are you willing to make a deal?
Dor said, not overwhelmed, but verging on it. Future history? Kingship in the foreseeable future? His father's mysterious talent? Another magician?
Very good. What you want is the elixir of restoration. What I want is historical information about a critically vague but important wave of Xanth. The elixir is similar to the healing elixir that is common enough today, but is of a distinct variant formula adapted to zombies. Only the zombie master of the fourth wave knows the formula. If I enable you to interview him, will you render me a complete accounting of your adventure in that realm?
The fourth wave? But
then it is agreed, Humphrey said. Sign your name to this release form here, so I can tie my history text into the spell.
He shoved a quill into Dor's flaccid hand and a printed parchment under it, and Dor almost automatically signed.
So good to do business with a reasonable magician. Ha! Here are my socks at last. High time.
For the golem had reappeared, staggering under the huge burden. Humphrey leaned forward and began squeezing his big feet into the socks. It was no wonder, Dor thought, that they got dirty so rapidly. The magician wasn't bothering to wash his feet before donning the socks.
The problem with the fourth wave of human colonization of Xanth is that it occurred circa 8 centuries ago. I trust you are familiar with Xanth history. The centaur pedagogue gave you the scoop? Good. So I don't need to remind you how the people came in brutal waves of conquest, killing and stealing and ravaging until they wasted it all, then had nothing better to do than settle down and watch their children turn magic, whereupon some new wave of no-magic barbarians would invade and victimize them. So a wave could be several generations in duration. The boldest of these, for reasons we won't go into now, was the fourth wave. The greatest of the ancient magicians lived then, Castle Roogna, who built Castle Roogna. King Roogna, who built Castle Roogna. His archenemy and dinner companion, Magician Muffy, and the Zombie Master, whom you will interview. Thus, lesser talents like Neo-Sorceress Vadne. How you will elicit the formula from the Zombie Master, I don't know. He was something of a recluse, not sociable the way I am.
Grundy snorted derisively.
Thank you,
Humphrey said. He seemed to thrive on insult.
Sit down, Dor. Right there will do.
Dor, too disoriented to protest, sat down on the decorated carpet he had been standing on, Grundy beside him. The texture of it was luxuriant. He was comfortable.
But the main problem is the time frame. The Zombie Master cannot come to you, so you must go to him. The only presently feasible way to do that is via the tapestry.
The tapestry? Dor asked, surprised by this familiar item. The Castle Roogna tapestry.
The same. I shall give you a spell to enable you to enter it. You will not do so physically, of course. Your body is much too big to be in scale. The spell will accommodate a reasonably close match, but you are hundreds of times too massive. So you will animate the body of one of the players already depicted there. We shall have to make an arrangement for your present body. Ah, I know. The brain coral. I owe it a favor. Or it owes me one. No difference. The coral has always wanted to taste mortality. It can animate your body during your absence, so no one will know. The golem will have to help cover for you, of course.
I've been doing that all along,
Grundy said complacently.
Now the carpet will take you to the coral, then to the tapestry. Don't worry, I have pre-programmed it. Here, better take something to eat along the way. Gorgon!
The Gorgon hurried in with 3 vials.
You didn't wash your feet,
she cried to the magician, appalled. Humphrey took a white vial from her hand.
I had her fix this earlier, so if it turns your stomach to stone, blame her, not me.
He almost chuckled as he handed the stoppered container to Dor.
Grundy, you better hang on to the spell. Remember, it's in 2 parts. The yellow puts him into the tapestry. The green puts the coral into his body. Don't confuse them.
He gave the golem 2 tiny colored packets.
Or is it the other way around? Well, on with you. I don't have all day.
He clapped his hands together with a sharp report and the carpet on which Dor sat took off. To surprise a protest, Dor grabbed for the edges and hung on.
"You don't have clean feet either,"
he heard the Gorgon saying indignantly to Humphrey as the carpet looped the room, getting its bearings.
"But I brought 2 dry cleaning spells, one for each foot, so—"
Dor missed the rest. The carpet sailed out of the room, through several other chambers, banked around a corner, angled up an interminably coiling stair, and shot out of a high turret window whose sides almost scraped skin off Dor's tight knuckles. Suddenly the ground was far below and getting farther. Already the magician's castle seemed small. "Hey, I think I'm scared of heights," Dor cried, his vision recoiling.
Nonsense, Grundy retorted. You made it up here okay, didn't you? What are you going to do, jump?
"No," Dor cried, horrified, "but I might quietly fall."
What you need is a good meal to settle your stomach during the boring flight, Grundy said. Let's just get this white bottle open.
"I'm not hungry. I think I'm height sick." The golem hauled at the cork, and it popped open. Fine smoke issued, swirled, and coalesced into 2 fine sandwiches, a brimming glass of milk, and a sprig of parsley. Dor had to grab at everything before the wind whipped it away.
We're traveling in style,
Grundy said, crunching his little teeth on the parsley.
Drink your milk, Dor.
"You sound like Millie." But Dor gulped his milk. It was very good, obviously fresh from the pod, and the milkweed must have been grown in chocolate soil.
I hear that in Mundania they squeeze milk out of animals,
Grundy observed. That made Dor's stomach do another royal. They really were barbarians in Mundania. Then he started in on a sandwich, as he had either to eat it or continue holding it, and he wanted his hands free to clutch the carpet again. It was a door jam and turnip sandwich, his favorite. Obviously, the good magician had researched his tastes and prepared for this occasion before Dor ever arrived at the castle. The second one was a red potato soup sandwich, somewhat squishy, but with excellent taste. The Gorgon had a very nice touch. Dor thought about the anomaly of so formidable a creature as the Gorgon reduced to being a common maid at the magician's castle while she waited to learn whether Humphrey would marry her. Yet, wasn't this the lot of the average woman? Maybe the magician was merely showing her what she could expect if she married. That could be more important than his actual answer. Or was that part of the answer? The good magician had his peculiarities, but also a devious comprehension of the real situation. He had obviously known all about Dor himself, yet allowed him to struggle through the rigors of entry into the castle. Odd competence. The carpet angled forward, causing Dor to suffer another spasm of vertigo. Yet his seat seemed secure. The material of the carpet seemed to hold him firmly yet comfortably, so that he did not slide off even when it tilted. Wonderful magic. Now the carpet banked, circling for a landing. But it didn't land. It plunged at frightening speed directly toward a deep crevasse in the ground. "Where are we going?" Dor cried, alarmed.
Into the teeth of a tangler, Grundy replied. A big one.
He pointed ahead, and for once he seemed less than cocksure. "Right," the rug agreed, still accelerating. It was indeed a big tangle tree, one not even an ogre could cow. Its massive trunk grew from the base of the chasm, while its upper tentacles overlapped the rim. What a menace that must be to travelers seeking to cross the cleft. The carpet banked again, accelerated again, and buzzed to the crest of the tree. The tentacles reached up hungrily. "Has this rug gone crazy?" Dor demanded. "Nobody tangles with a full-size tangler."
Oh, big Sphinx might get away with it, Grundy suggested. Or the old invisible giant. Or a cockatrice.
The carpet banked yet again, sending Door's hair flying to the side, and looped around for another nervy pass at the top of the tree. This time the tentacles were ready. They rose up in a green mass to intercept it.
Doom!
Grundy cried, covering his eyes.
Why did I ever turn real?
But the carpet plunged directly below the tentacles, zooming right past the bared and scowling trunk of the Tangler and into the ground at its base. Except that the ground opened into a small crevice transfixed by a root, and the carpet dropped into this hole. Down, down. The horror of the heights had been abruptly replaced by the horror of the depths. Door cowered, expecting to smash momentarily into a wall. But the carpet seemed to know its harrowing route. It never touched a wall. There began to be a little light, a sustained glow from the walls. But this only showed how convoluted this region was. Chamber after chamber opened and closed, and passages branched at all angles. Yet the carpet sped unerringly along its programmed route, down into the very bowels of Xanth. Bowels. Dor wished his thought hadn't phrased it that way. He still felt nervously sick. This harebrained ride. The carpet abruptly halted beside a somber subterranean lake. In this faint illumination, the water itself assumed a glow, revealing murky depths suggestive of mind-boggling secrets. The carpet settled to the cavern floor and became limp.
This must be our station,
Grundy observed. But there's nothing here. Nothing living, he meant.
I am here,
something thought in his mind.
I am the brain coral, here beyond your sight beneath the lake. You bear the stigma of the good magician and are accompanied by his golem. Have you come to abate his debt to me?
I am my own golem,
Grundy protested.
And I'm not a golem anymore. I'm real.
He said it was your debt to him, Dor answered the brain coral nervously. This was an uncomfortable place, and there was disquieting power in the mental voice, and an alien quality. This was a creature of magician-class magic, but not at all human. I think.
Same thing,
the voice thought, whereas it was the thought voicing.
What is the offer?
If you would care to animate my body while my spirit is away. I know it's not much of a body, just a juvenile.
Done, the coral replied. Go work your spells. I will be there.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have existed 1,000 years, storing mortals in my preservative lake, without ever enjoying the sensations of mortality myself. Now at last I shall experience them, however fleetingly.
Yes, I guess. You do understand that I will want my body back when...
Naturally. Such spells are always self-limiting. There will be no more than a fortnight before it reverts. Time enough.
Self-limiting? Dor hadn't known that. What a good thing the good magician had set it up. Had Dor tried to work such a spell by himself, he could have been stuck forever in the tapestry. The best spells were fail-safe. The carpet took off without warning. Farewell, Coral! Dor cried, but there was no answer. Either the brain coral's communications range was short, or it had ceased to pay attention, or it objected to inane courtesies. The return trip was similar to the descent, with its interminable convolutions, but now Dor felt more secure, and his stomach stayed pretty much in place. He had new confidence in the good magician's planning and in the carpet's competence. He hardly winced as they shot up out of the crack into the bosom of the tangle tree, though he did have a qualm as the tentacles convulsed. The carpet merely dodged the embrace, allowing the tangler to catch nothing but the qualm, and zoomed past the base of the crevasse. When well clear of the tree, it rose smoothly out of the chasm and powered into the sky. The afternoon was blindingly bright after the gloom of the caverns. Now they flew north. Dor looked down, trying to spot the magic dust village, but all he saw was jungle. One area was dark, as if burned out, but no village. Then, all too soon, Castle Roogna hove in view. The carpet circled at once, getting its bearings as was its wont, then slanted down and into a window, through a hall, and into the tapestry room.
"Here's the first spell,"
Grundy said, lifting the yellow package.
"No, wait!"
Dor cried, abruptly afraid of the magnitude of what he contemplated. He had supposed he would only have to search out some hidden spring in the contemporary world, and now faced a far more significant undertaking. To actually enter a picture.
"I need time to uncramp my legs
To decide whether he was really up to this challenge. Maybe. But Grundy was already tearing open the wrapping. Yellow mist spread out, diffusing into the air, forming a little cloud.
"I don't even know what body in the tapestry to."
Then the enfolding mist encompassed him. Dor felt himself swaying, falling without falling. For a moment, he saw his body standing there stupidly, tousle-haired and slack-jawed. Then the great tapestry was coming at him, expanding hugely. There was a bug on it, and this too fuzzed out. He glimpsed a section of woven jungle, with a muscular young man standing with a huge sword, at bay, against... Hot diggity, that ended up being a long chapter. I mean, I felt like I was reading pretty quickly, and it still took me an hour and 45 minutes to get through that one. Woo! All right, everybody. Well, that is going to do it for our story time for this evening. But again, I will ask, how is the pacing on this one? Do you guys feel that this pacing is better than the previous books has been? I've been trying to pick up the pace and have it go a little bit faster in the way that I'm speaking, and I want to make sure that it is coming across better for you guys, and I hope it is. Once again, big shout out to the real Barbette and anybody else who has given me the feedback that my pacing was too slow. And, I am now working on making sure that it is at an appropriate level. So hopefully it is now where it should be, or at least much closer to where it should be. As always, if you guys have any feedback on any of it, if I'm going too slow, if I'm going too fast, if, anything like that, please feel free to provide that feedback to me. I'm just here doing my thing. Unless I hear from you guys, I think I'm doing it well. So one way or the other, I think I'm doing it well. So, hey, let me know. But all right, everybody. I hope you guys enjoyed this start to Book 3 of the Xanth series, Castle Roogna, where we now have Bink's son, Dor, who is a magician in his own right, can talk to inanimate objects, has gotten a quest to get a potion to heal a zombie, and has just been sent into a tapestry that will essentially take him into a world 800 years in the past. Should be fun. Either way, I hope you guys enjoyed. Tomorrow, I will be here for Abomination Vaults, a Pathfinder adventure on Foundry VTT. And then Thursday, Stompy Mech Night. Thank you to all of you. Remember, the greatest gift that you can give to a streamer is the gift of your time. And I appreciate that you guys gave me the gift of yours this evening. Whether it was for 5 minutes or for 3 hours. Thanks so much for having been here with me. Hope I'll see you guys a little bit later this week. Remember, these chapters will be posted to my YouTube channel a little bit later this evening. Have a great night, everybody, and I will see you all again really soon. Good night, all.